I believe we have to codify Roe v. Wade in the law, and the way to do that is to make sure the Congress votes to do that. And if the filibuster gets in the way, it's like voting rights. It should be, we provide an exception for this, require an exception to the filibuster for this action to deal with the Supreme Court decision.
Well, he could barely spit it out. That's point number one. Point number two, attacking the Supreme Court and the filibuster and all that from Spain. You know, there was an old adage that we all learned in high school. Politics stops at the water's edge because we're all Americans and we believe in our country. And then he's having a rough week. He and Chuck Schumer and all of them having a rough week about the Supremes. I want to put a quick plug in, okay, folks? Former President Donald Trump, who put Gorsuch and Barrett and Kavanaugh on the court. And they are producing tremendous results to get our country back, right? Yesterday we talked about it, to restore life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those kudos go to former President Donald Trump. Now, let us bring in Charlie Hurt, Washington Times opinion editor, Fox News contributor. Charlie, I mean, you know, it's so Bushly. He's got to do this from Spain. He can't talk about Russia, Ukraine, NATO defense, Western defense. China's a pain in the neck. India's hurting us on oil purchases. There's nothing else he can talk about but ending the filibuster for the Supreme Court?
Yeah, it really is appalling, and I think that your point is the most important one, and that is, you know, there was a time when obviously politics ended at our nation's shores, but usually the people that would violate that rule was some you know, knucklehead leader of an opposition party that would wander overseas and start attacking the president. Here you have the actual president of the United States attacking the Supreme Court overseas, and it really, I think that, you know, before this administration, I don't think we would have ever imagined something like that happening, and I think it's very dangerous and it's bad for the country.
Look at I do want to belabor this point. I think it's a big point. You're right.
Yeah.
Look at he's in Spain attacking his own Supreme Court, which is tantamount to attacking American institutions and American democratic values. He's overseas doing this. Really? And I mean, the Spanish used to be the ones with the autocracy and the dictatorship and the fascism. This guy can't accept the fact that legitimately nominated and voted upon justices made their call. You know, you win a few, you lose a few in this game.
And at a point when it's so important, you know, for us to sort of revere the institutions that are still working in this country, to have the president of the United States, this is not just some opposition yahoo on the edges, the president of the United States going overseas to attack the third branch of the government. It really is appalling. And then all this business about talking about wanting to remove the filibuster, you know, Joe Biden was sworn in to the United States Senate about 3 weeks before Roe v. Wade was handed down. For nearly 50 years, he has been in Washington, and part of the problem, he could have done something about abortion during that entire 50 years, and he's never done it. Because Democrats were perfectly content leaving abortion in the hands of the high court, as opposed to in the, you know, being debated by regular voters and who could sort of have some input to it. And now suddenly, suddenly he's lost this, and he wants to invoke the idea of a filibuster. It's talk about you know, trying to gather up your marbles and because you lost and run home. It's appalling.
When does he start coming out in favor of 4 new justices?
I pray that we don't get to that, because as hard as this is now, as difficult, and by the way, I think that would be an election loser for him. I think Democrats would get destroyed if they did that, but they could do a lot of damage in the process. And look, a big reason, I want Democrats to be a viable alternative, political alternative in our country. We need that. We need vibrant, at least two vibrant parties.
You're speaking to an ex-Democrat.
Yeah, yes.
Who worked for 2 presidents who were ex-Democrats.
But and you kept Republicans honest, and that's vitally important. But when you have this nonsense going on, where you know, attacking the Supreme Court like this, you're not proving yourself to be a viable party, and you're not doing anything to help to help the country.
So you and I have talked, I believe last week we talked, which is going to be more important, Roe v. Wade or inflation. Now, I want to update you. This afternoon, the Atlanta Fed GDP tracker, which everybody follows, it isn't perfect, and not all the second quarter data is in, but they just posted a minus 1% estimate for Q2. We had yesterday a slight downward revision in GDP to minus 1.6, and we're doing this with an 8 to 10% inflation rate. So we have high inflation, recessionary economy. I can't think of anything worse. Which is going to be more important, the economy or Roe?
As your resident expert on non-expert on the economy, I can tell you,
That's why I asked you.
The economy is going to be what everybody goes to the polls over this November. That said, I don't think that I do think it's interesting that Democrats pretend like abortion is suddenly going to be this huge winner, this huge issue in the election. Well, then why did they hide it from voters for 50 years? It's not like Democrats aren't willing to exploit every single issue that they can if it helps them. I think the reason that they don't want voters to decide this issue is because in the end, I don't think that it's a winner for them. I just don't.
You know, just to wrap up, we're out of time, but I think your point, Biden in Spain attacking the Supreme Court, one of our greatest institutions, is a loser for him and his party.
And not only is it a vital institution, but it's also a non-political institution.
Right.
That's the whole point of it. That's why you're not allowed to go and threaten justices, because it's not a political institution.
Which they won't bust.
Right.
Which they still won't bust.
Right. And exactly. And then to have the president of the United States basically threatening them and basically trying to politicize them, it's very bad for them.
Where, by the way, the ink was barely dry on the Roe decision last Friday, then the Department of Justice, supposedly there to uphold the law, brutally attacked, just lashed out at the Supreme Court for doing it.
Just incredible.
What is that? I had Bill Barr here last night asking about that. Not good.
Right.
Not good.
No. It's and that's why I say, there's all of it is a loser for Democrats, but they can do a lot of damage between now and when the cavalry arrives.
Yeah. We've seen it. Yeah, you're right. I got to wait 4 months, but a few squadrons have landed on shore.
We've got troops behind the lines. They're riding back and forth.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Charlie Hurt, Washington Times. Thank you, buddy. Great to see you on set as